Oh my gosh. Oh. How are you?
I think this is our group.
Okay. I'm on the library report. Okay, well.
Oh, yes, we did last week and we'll do another one.
Would you like me just to dig in? Get started?
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you all for coming. This is really, really wonderful. And Gary is very sorry that he's just not up to that kind of travel. He's at home in Poughkeepsie, New York. He's been through some little health things recently as well. And because he is bipolar, right there in the title, he leads a very rigid life. He goes to bed at 4 in the afternoon, and he gets up at midnight every day. And he has a very healthy, rather rigid diet, not one I could follow. But he's become healthy. This is really the way that he's put his life together. So it is what it is. So I'm here, and but I extend his very best wishes and his real genuine excitement that the painting is here. He's going to want to hear. From the depths, dyslexia, bipolar disorder, and the triumph of art. It isn't a feel-good story, so there's no real kind of rainbow at the end. But it is a wonderful story. It's sort of started because Gary and I met at the, can we knock off a little bit of light because it's just reflecting off the, thank you. Yeah, it is better, makes the pictures look better. Des Moines Art Center, if you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. I was the education curator there in the late 80s, and I met his wife, Diane. And the two of us became friends. That's the original building over there in the upper right. That's the Saarinen building. It was built in the 1940s. It's the last structure by Eliel Saarinen before he died, a very famous architect, the father of Eero Saarinen, also a famous architect. Don't get ahead of me. The middle one is the sculpture wing, and it was designed by I.M. Pei in 1958. And it's the first building, first museum I.M. Pei designed. Then in 1986, they opened the Meyer wing, which I personally loathe, but that happens. You can't all love everything. And there's an inner courtyard with this wonderful reflecting pool and the Carl Mellis statue, which is really, it's Pegasus and Bellerophon, who were, Bellerophon was the sort of little buddy of Zeus, and he got above himself. And Zeus got angry, so he sent a hornet, a wasp, to sting Pegasus, so he knocked Bellerophon off. That's the basic story of the sculpture. I personally love it. When I was there, the Des Moines Art Center has a lovely little cafe, and they considered having their own wine, so they put their own label on it. You can do this. So, but you have to send your label design to the ATF. It got turned down as obscene because we used Pegasus and Bellerophon. It was just a little line drawing. Anyway, now, and so this is when they got together. Because I got to know Diane. She wanted to be an art museum educator. I mentored her. She became one. And that's actually part of Gary's story as well. Now, Diane and I remained in touch. I moved to Maryland. She went through a series of jobs. Gary expressed his friendship kind of obliquely. He's very shy. But he sent me gifts, including this wonderful sweatshirt, hand-painted, Frosty on the half shell. Extra points, as I tell my art history students, if you can identify the original work of art it's based on. And fused glass things, those are pins that I still wear at Christmas. Oh, this thing's on a timer, that's probably what it is. Okay, in 1992, Diane invited me to the Gibbs Museum in Charleston, South Carolina, where she was working, to talk to her docents. And while I was there, Gary asked to take some Polaroids because he had an idea for a painting. this is the painting that resulted from it, and I bought it in 1994. It turns out that this painting is the earliest Gary Horn that we have. There's so little that survives for a host of reasons and moves and disasters and what have you. Hang on a second. This probably, I will figure out how to make a timer. Excuse me if we go back and forth. So, but I do have quite a few of his artworks in my tiny little East Boston condominium. That is my Gary Horn collection. It's all Gary Horns, and everything sort of fits in. And they were all gifts. Although technically the apple was a gift to my son, I don't know, high school, college, something. But I keep it for him. And they remind me of those moments when they entered my life, when I received them. But they also, now that I've written the book, make me think about what Gary was doing and what he was going through and what he was thinking about at that time. There we go. He's a very funny guy. That, by the way, is my dog, Ping. That's her Gary Horn t-shirt, which she wears. And this is a bag with one of his paintings on it. And those are coupons. It's called The History of White People. And it's full of jokes, but they're basically get out of jail free cards for anything that I should find myself needing a get out of jail free card, because they're for white people. Gary Horn, around 2020, his mom, Lola, standing in front of the Grantwood House in Eldon. So I love this picture. And this is the trip that they were on together when he painted, when he collected the information, when he started thinking about the painting that is now here. I love all the stories about Lola. She was quite something. And she was an artist, and she painted, and she inspired her kids, and she was really, I think, quite a wonderful woman. I would have loved to have met her. I was aware of what he was going through. I knew when he got divorced. I hoped that his partnership with a dancer-turned-art museum educator, Rika Burnham, with old. I was aware when he came back to Iowa in 2005 to see his mom. And I knew when he moved to Poughkeepsie from New York City and why, the circumstances around that. So, female, it's a wonderful thing. And he took the train all the way to Baltimore from Poughkeepsie. It is a long train ride. So that the two of us could go to the exhibition at the Baltimore Museum of Art called Diebencore and Matisse. For those who don't know, the Baltimore Museum of Art has the best collection of Matisses outside of France in the Matisse Museum. And it was an amazing exhibition. It was really stunning. And being able to walk around it with Gary, and Gary would go, "Oh, look at that line, that color," and he's sitting there, he's talking about what the artists are doing. I'm an art historian. I just think about context and information and dating and all that kind of stuff that really doesn't matter. But he was there telling me about how these artists made art, which I thought was wonderful. Now, we did have a misguided attempt at a collaboration on a memoir, but there can only be one voice in a memoir, not two. So we decided I would write a biography, or maybe a monograph, or maybe both, and put them together. And when that was underway, it did occur to me that it's the 21st century, technology is our friend, or supposedly, and so I thought about other platforms. So I thought about Instagram. Now, I didn't know how to do Instagram, and nor did Gary, but I figured it out. And he sent me paintings every week, pictures of them, and I would put them up, and the Instagram is there. You can go look at it, see all this work of art. And I would write the texts. So the writing was my job. I put everything up. I just kind of handle it. So there's a lot of material there. And it's kind of fun because this, like the main page shows, it's like a big puzzle. And so there's a whole bunch of, these are actually all kinds of different eras and periods and subject matters. So I just arbitrarily took a big slice out of the middle, and that's what it did. Now, the first painting that I used as a trial was this one, and it's called The Amazing Juggler with Self-Portrait, and it's based on the one on the left, which is in the Des Moines Art Center. It's by an artist named Yasuo Kuniyoshi. I have a thing for Yasuo Kuniyoshi. It's just a me thing. And when I find people who, for some reason, really love a painting I love, or really love an artist I love, and especially when we feel that that artist is kind of ignored or overlooked, then I feel that much closer to them. And so at that wonderful event in Baltimore at the museum, when he came down, he gave me this print, which is a variation on the theme, you could see. And it wasn't until I put this presentation together that I started looking at those two things side by side and started thinking about how differently he'd approach a painting versus a print. Much of the similar symbolism, there are various ideas, but they are wonderful. This is titled What Cannot Be Remembered is Forgotten, and it is a really wonderful one. The Kuniyoshi painting, which is called Amazing Juggler, and you have this guy, it was done in the 50s, and it was done very shortly before Kuniyoshi's death. And the colors are amazing, and Gary remembers being a high school kid here in Winterset, and he took classes at the Des Moines Art Center. And he remembers seeing it then, and he remembers seeing it again when he was older. And it took him really a long time to understand what he found so compelling about it. And the same was true with me. I saw it, I went, oh my God, this is fantastic. But coming up with the words to explain what I thought was so fantastic about it, that took me a while. And it just spoke to me, and it spoke to Gary. So the self-portrait is very hard to see in this kind of thing. It's in this corner, so he uses the juggler. He puts his self-portrait in, that's New York City, out the window where he was living, and that's the kind of views that he was used to. The balls are different, because he's juggling different kinds of balls, including the blue one, which is a globe. It's a little earth that's being juggled. And there's all of these kind of thoughts about art and children. These funny little drawings here were taken from children's drawings. He had a friend who had a couple of very small kids, and he would actually keep those kids' drawings, and he would use them in later works of art. Now, I always wonder when I see a work of art, how it came to be. Like, where did it come from? What was the artist thinking about? What went into that? Here we have the handsome horn boys. Michael is the oldest, and Gary's there on the left, and
That's me in the middle.
Yeah, it's Jeff in the middle. And this is actually the house here in Winterset that they grew up in.
603 East Court.
Easily recognizable.
There you go. Very local. And so a lot of Gary's art comes from his reading, ideas in his reading, or things that he sees. And one day he saw that photograph. It's by Cartier-Bresson, a very famous French photographer. And what really struck him about it, you have these two black men across the sort of pond there from the Jefferson Memorial. And they're both dressed in black, and they're both quite dark skinned, and one turns one way and the other way. And so their bodies kind of merge. And so you've got these two different selves kind of pulling. And that spoke to Gary, that sense that that was himself, the depressive pulling back, and the manic trying to move forward, and these different parts of him that were pulling him in very different directions. And so we see that here in the front, there are like the ghosts of the past, that little house, but then the background is largely taken from World War II, pictures of Dresden and Syria, more recent pictures of that, and the kind of wreckage of human lives. Because that was part of the story there as well. The title, The Death of Percival, comes from a book by Virginia Woolf. It's called The Years, and the protagonist, sort of based on her brother, Percival, dies just as he gets to that age where he's no longer a child and he's just entering adulthood, much like Percival, the Knight of the Round Table, who has these similar things, and that was where Virginia Woolf got her idea. And so that kind of sense of the child and the adult, the past and the future, the struggle, all of that came together to give him different ideas. There are many different bodies of work. They're not all oil on canvas. Some of them are oil or tempera with gold leaf on panel. So it uses a technique that was very popular in the 14th century. And it's a way that he can look back at time. That's actually a picture of Barry working, that's Khalid, and he's working on this painting, and in the background, you can actually see the other painting. So that's his tiny, tiny little Poughkeepsie studio. Very tiny studio, very big ideas. And the one over there on the left is called The Statue of Bigotry. The Dream is Over. It's done in 2020, and this one is The Apocalypse of Crime, done in 21-22. It's really a big painting. It's 4 feet by 5 feet. It's quite enormous. The chains, the crime scene tape, all of that is add-ons. That's not painted in any way. Apocalypse, as I said, was very large. It speaks to the creation, Michelangelo's Great Ceiling at the Vatican. God's Face, so there's God in purple there, is Meyer Amschel Rothschild, the founder of the Rothschild banking family. The atom figure has George Washington's face that we get from the $1 bill, and the Federal Reserve Bank seal is the halo behind his head. As a founder, Washington is difficult. He entrenched slavery in America. He supported the genocide of indigenous peoples, and he secured the franchise exclusively for white male landowners. And these are all things that you have to kind of work with when you want to tell the whole story, as I think we do like to sort of hear that story. Michelangelo's familiar figures remind us of Christianity, and that the salvation of souls was so part of the justification for the depredations of Native Americans. And it started with the Catholic missionaries. It continued with Christian missionaries of all different kinds, and they pretty much all follow the motto eventually articulated by Pratt at the Carlisle Indian School: kill the Indian in him and save the man. And that is, of course, the same school where the great Jim Thorpe was a student and other people were. And the words in the painting itself, it's got many, many layers, and you could actually begin to pick out text that is painted into the blues with other blues. The violet square, there's a little key up there in the upper left-hand corner. The violet square is Europe. So if you look at the back, you can see Europe is violet. Green areas are colonized or controlled by Europe. So that's South America, Africa, Australia, Indonesia, and behind Adam, North America. So those are all of those areas. The yellow ones show the European sphere of influence, even if they didn't specifically control those areas. The orange on this map is the only places on the globe left untouched by European imperialism. So you have a tiny little bit of Africa there, and you have a tiny little bit of Japan and Korea right there, and a tiny little bit of Indonesia, and that's pretty much it. And it kind of shows you how mixed the world is and how wide our hands reach.
You didn't say the blue. The blue is independent somehow? China and Saudi Arabia and Turkey?
The blue is, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that one. Partial European control. So, China, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. So that's that kind of mix. Thank you. Gary says greed is the altar of insatiable power, and that the unceasing pursuit of wealth is really the crime against humanity and the natural world. He says, and this is a quote, "There is no way to overturn the abuses of capitalism. We elect our politicians, but unfortunately we don't and can't elect the oligarchs and plutocrats that control and run them." He is a person of strong political feelings, and I really admire that because he believes it, he lives it, and he puts it in his heart.
Trust me, Ellen, we have plenty of them around here too.
You know, and it was kind of fun. I mean, Gary and I was going, it could be really, really fun if, we could get some jolly conversations going. But I love this one. It's a little more recent, and it refers to that persona he developed when he was having some difficulties. Instead of painting as himself, he created this person called Robert Des Moines, who's a kind of pop artist. And so there's every now and then the Robert Des Moines personality kind of bubbles up. And it bubbled up here in 2024. This is called money, because the cliche verse that the money is the root of all evil. It may or may not be. I'm just saying that's the cliche, but if you see here, it is the root of evil, is the root, square root right there. It is really, money itself is just a thing. It's an arbitrary construct. It is how money is used, how it is deployed, the way it is engaged with human activities that really matter. And of course, money and greed in particular has its counterweight in philanthropy. Where are we? This is an Andrew Carnegie library, and there's a perfect example of greed and philanthropy sitting in a single personality. And in sort of looking back into pop art, he's looking particularly at somebody like Roy Lichtenstein, who created paintings that replicated the Ben-Day dots that were used in printed things like comic books and whatnot. They used to screen, and so how big the dots were, how much white space there were would affect the color. And he uses dots and dashes, those little lines that you can see across his forehead. It's very hard. I actually blew it up really big to see it myself. There are 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. What is that?
SOS.
It's SOS. And so Save Our Souls is sort of written across Washington's forehead. And I just think this is a really great painting. It's powerful, it's assertive, it's very simple, and yet you can see it, walk away, and remember it, and that's really great. But if you stand there and look at it, there is so much to look at. And that's really true of Gary's art generally. Stand there and look at it, and more stuff just sort of comes out of it at you.
How big is it in real life? How big is it?
I didn't put the size. I think it's 48, probably 48 wide, 28 high.
So it's big.
Yeah, it's good size. He tends to work biggish. And once again, Washington is difficult. He signed the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, which put slaves in terrible danger, even if they made it to someplace that slavery was not allowed. And when he went to Philadelphia, the seat of the government, and was part of the president, he brought some of his slaves with him. And what he did is he rotated them, because Pennsylvania was a free state. And they had a rule that if a black person was there for, I think it was like 3 months or something, and they stayed beyond that, they were automatically emancipated. So Washington simply rotated the slaves so that they weren't falling under that category of freedom. One of the slaves got away, a woman, and she managed to successfully escape all the way up into New Hampshire. She spent her life on the run, but she was able to get away. And there are historical things, you know, you can see the ads that were put out for her. He spent slave trackers after her and all kinds of things. He was very angry that this woman had stolen herself and run off with his property. But I'm glad to say she made it to freedom. During his sojourn in Wichita, Kansas, so they went, when he was with Diane, they went first to the, I forget what it's called these days, but it was the Davenport Art Museum on the edge of the state. And then they went down to Charleston, South Carolina to the Gibbs. And after that, they went to the Wichita Art Museum. And what was becoming clear was that Diane was sort of getting and losing jobs with a certain speed, and it was upsetting things. But Wichita turned out to be an oddly fantastic place for Gary. His marriage died there, but he was in a prolonged period of mania. He got a tremendous amount of work done, and he felt good. It was just this sort of powerful thing. He said, the conditions of life in Kansas, the light and weather, my reading, my teaching, and my art were part of a 3-year hypomania that created a state of euphoria. I was a different person in Kansas than I had been anywhere else, at least for a while. I had confidence that I could do no wrong. And he starts this program of reading. And this really amazes me. Again, this is a severely dyslexic person. I have a brother who's severely dyslexic, and he became a lawyer, and I'm terribly impressed. But Gary reads. He has difficulty reading, he reads slowly, but he reads all the time. And so he embarked on this reading program that proved absolutely transformative. And he started with books by artists, by Kandinsky, by Pete Mondrian, and by others, some explorations of the old masters. And so this was a really remarkable thing. And he was thinking about what they were saying. He was thinking about their art. And when he would read something, he'd then go to the library and he'd get a video, if he could, that maybe showed something about them, or find another book, or a book with a lot of pictures in it. And so he'd use that as kind of backup material. And he also, and I think this is not inconsequential, had a studio in Wichita, a big industrial building. It was a terrible place. It was hot in the summer and cold in the winter, and it was terrible, but it was his space. It was $50 a month, and it was his place to work. So he did his teaching, and spent some time at home, and he mostly worked in that studio. And having that sort of brought all this out. And we see him starting to play with those abstractions. Now, he didn't start, and he still isn't, an abstract artist, but he had these ideas. And so these are 3 paintings that sort of relate to that period. Proletariat Gothic, a little more recent, Red Studio from 1995, that was done in Wichita, and Cac Light over here.
Ellen?
Ellen?
In 2017, Gary spent
That's right.
summer at my house.
Yep.
And his studio was our garage, and he painted the 2 pictures
Yep.
that are on the bottom there at that time.
That was an amazing thing. He had the ideas worked up, he had the drawings worked up,
Yeah.
and he packed up everything he needed from Poughkeepsie and came out here. I said, how did you get there? And he goes, the train. And I'm like, oh my God, what century are we in? I just sort of like the 19th century, moving across the United States with your entire household goods packed up. And I really, I think, isn't Red Studio hanging in your house?
No, I have a different one.
Yeah, it's a different one. And so these 3 artists are very much in there. Matisse, Malevich, and Mondrian. So Matisse, the French painter, let's go on to the next one. That's the Matisse Red Studio up there. That's Malevich, the figures in the middle, and that's a Kandinsky there at the bottom. So these are the kinds of things that were in his head when he was starting to work on this. The Red Studio alludes to the Matisse painting. It's the same, equally red, a different red, but whatever. And he replaces things. So this figure, which is himself, is a figure out of Malevich. And the books, you can actually see Matisse paintings, and you can pick out specific things. There is a fan behind his head that operates like a kind of halo. And the hand at the top with this long drip of paint is both a kind of modernist expression, but it also refers back to a 13th century painter named Cimabue, who was the teacher of Giotto. And the very first, because this is very early 13th century, to begin painting and using his visual experience of the world around him, as opposed to diagramming things that matched the rules. And so his beginning to see the world around him was something that Gary really wanted to include. So we have that kind of allusion there. And the paintings become just the same as they are in the Matisse. Kind of hard, but that one over there on the left isn't a painting, although it is a painting, it's a window. And I've been in that studio, and I've looked out that window, and that is the view. So on the one hand, it's very realistic, it's very precise. On the other hand, it's painting, and it's just colors and shapes and forms at the same time. And that was that whole kind of moment. And this is also the moment that Gary is turning around. He'd been playing with abstraction. He's now coming back to representation and the figure and symbolism. And he's learning a lot from Renaissance art, because they do that very well. And he's learning a lot about structure from the abstractionists. So modernism is all kind of coming in. He's open to all of these different ideas. Proletariat Gothic is one of my absolute favorites, yes. Painted in Jeff's garage. The original is wonderful. Grant Wood's painting is justly famous, but of course it's also a meme at this point. And it's one of those things that's out there with a fantastic number of cartoons based on it. I used to collect them. So, and it sort of speaks to that moment. 2017, Trump has started his first administration. Gary's not happy about that. Vladimir Putin had just annexed the Crimea, and just 3 years earlier, tensions were rising between America and Russia, and that whole Cold War that both Gary and I grew up with seemed to be kind of raising its head again. Malevich and Kandinsky were both victims of the Soviet rise. Malevich was told to give up abstraction, and he began to work in a sort of representational, sort of instructional style, the way he was supposed to, but eventually they put him in jail. And he was in jail, and then he got out of jail, and then he died. Kandinsky left, and he went west, and he landed up at in Germany at the Bauhaus before moving on to Paris after the war, and he died there in Paris in 1944. And so in this painting over here, I think it's fantastic because you have Grant Wood's door dentist standing there with his pitchfork. And so the Malevich figure stands in for his sister Nan. And you've got it right in front of the house in Eldon. And the sky just explodes with Kandinsky. It's like there's a whirlwind or an incredible kind of tornado coming in. And if you can look very carefully, you'll see in the Gothic window, there's a thumbs up. There's a little blue thumbs up like you get from Facebook right there. because there's a very interesting relationship between Grant Wood and these other artists. Grant Wood, of course, was running the art department at the University of Iowa. And he had been to Europe and he'd studied lots of different things, and he was ardently anti-modernist, anti-abstraction, and he was very unkind to any of the faculty there who tried to incorporate it into their teaching or look at it or get involved with it in any way. And so Gary said the concept of the painting was to show solidarity with the Russian people, and most of all with Russian artists who had contributed so much to his spirituality. The Russian people, and particularly artists, are not our enemy. Governments hold power through fear and need enemies, real or imagined, to maintain their grip on the population. I stand with the Russian people, not their government. I stand with the American people, and not my government. In my painting, the Russians and Americans exist in peace and harmony. And I just find this painting, it sends me in a lot of different directions, and I often change my feelings about it. This one, I just find endearing. It's called Kak, which is Cyrillic. It's actually written in Cyrillic there. It means like. It's a Russian word for like. And Malevich emerged as this artist. Now, after he got arrested and he was told to change over, he produced this little tiny self-portrait. It's a very small painting. And it has him dressed up in Renaissance clothing, because he's sending out this message like, yes, I am in this situation, but let's not forget who invented abstraction here, who brought the black square, who did all these things, and he left these extraordinary writings behind. So that costume is actually the costume that Malevich dresses himself in 1932, and he died in the late 30s. Now Gary is wearing the pajamas that really begin to show up a lot in his work, and the pajamas are based on concentration camp uniforms. And also they allow Gary very often to be transparent, because he can play games with the stripes back and forth. And you have this. And here they stand side by side, sharing. Malevich's Red Square, he actually did a painting called Red Square, and that's all it was. It's behind Gary's head. It's like a halo, like this wonderful thing. And between them is an emblem that is very important to Gary. It comes from Theosophy. The yellow triangle, which is like the lilies out there, upward pointing, is for spirituality. Forget what the red is, and the blue is the earth and the globe. And altogether, it's an emblem that we see a lot. But what I absolutely love about this was that they're standing together, and these hands, right? They're like reaching each other. And they're going, please, meet my friend, my colleague, my brother. I just, the connection between them as personalities. And I go, I don't know if Gary could meet Malevich. Would it be wonderful? It would be wonderful for both of them. And so you have the yellow upward pointing triangle, the blue of the orb is eternal, and did I not write? Oh yes, conjoins the red square of the earthly. So the red is earth, triangle is spirituality, and the blue orb is the universe, it's the cosmos, all together in one little bit. And Kak, as I said, is Russian for how or like. In the comparative sense, I actually looked it up and spent a whole lot of time studying the word. I don't know Russian, so I did the best I could. But it means how or like, but generally in a kind of comparative sense. It can be used to identify someone in the sense of what is your name. Both teacher and student elevate each other and together kind of introduce themselves and each other and go, I am like the other. And so Kak. Armed Freedom is a fairly recent piece from 2023. It's based on the statue that's on the top of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. That is a design by Thomas Crawford, a 19th century American sculptor who worked up the design and then sadly died, as that happens. And it's an allegorical figure of a woman wearing a military helmet, holding a sheathed sword in her right hand and a laurel wreath and shield in her left. And the creation of that statue on top of our Capitol is actually rich with irony, because there were a whole bunch of problems getting it put together. It's huge. It is very large. And it's sort of like the Statue of Liberty on top of the Capitol. I mean, it's really immense. After a series of problems, the 5 main sections of the model arrived from Italy at a foundry on the outskirts of Washington, because they had to be cast, and then the pieces had to be welded together, and the thing had to be put in place. Delayed by the start of the Civil War, work resumed in 1862, only to be halted because the white foreman in charge of this project went on strike to demand higher wages. So the foundry owner said, no, fine, leave. That's fine, because the foreman on the job was a slave, was an enslaved person, put him in charge. And that person, named Philip Reed, we do know who that is, presided over the casting of the rest of the parts. In 1863, he supervised the black men, then freed by the Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862, who hoisted the parts onto the dome and assembled them up there on top of the pedestal. So it's thanks to Philip Reed, an enslaved person who took over the job from a white person who just was being uncooperative, and that we have this wonderful thing here. The subtitle, it says, "One morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas." That's a quotation from Groucho Marx, and that dangling participial phrase is as absurd as our denial about gun violence. The striped pajamas are empty, making the shooter a nobody and everybody. The coiled snake comes from the "don't tread on me" tradition. The flags left behind, and you can see them in this sort of, it shows danger because the flag is shown upside down, but you can see the stripes and the stars in the background kind of coming up out of the background color. And it just kind of brings a whole host of current thoughts together those images. The quotation at the top, the quotation behind the black writing, so the quotation in red, is from Albert Camus in The Rebels, and it says, "Armed freedom is the servant of death." And down below, this quotation is from Nietzsche, and the words say, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die. As well the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be minds." So Gary has given us some extra food for thought as we look at that. And his art is autobiographical, and there's certainly a very strong, distinct thread there. And in the book and on our Instagram, that sense of a real arc, that there are really specific periods that my little art historian heart goes zing. Oh, goody, things that I can talk about that are art historical. And I get all excited about that, but I do try to stay focused on what he's doing. That is Khalid, about 2020. He's a very important person now because he takes care of Gary. Gary was having a very hard time in 2017. He came back from Iowa. It wasn't that Iowa had been bad. He got a tremendous amount done, had a great time with you. What are those disgusting fruit ice cream things you were going out and getting? I don't know, they sounded awful, but apparently they were delicious. And
You find one right over there.
okay, well, to each his own. And but he went into a very, very dark depression. It was really bad, and he got seriously suicidal again, not for the first time. And he was sitting there and he was thinking about the gun he didn't have. And he's going, it's a good thing I live in New York because I'm not eligible to own a gun. There's no way I could actually get a gun legally in the state of New York. And so it's maybe a good thing, because if I had a gun, I might use it. I would probably have used it. He's going, but you know, dogs are good. So he decided he wanted a dog. And he started looking, and he wanted specifically a border collie. So he looked at rescues, and on Thanksgiving, they contacted him and said, we've got a rescue for you, 13 months old. And his landlord drove him to the pickup spot. And so Khalid joined his landlord, also named him, because it is an Arabic word for beautiful, which he certainly is. And it's interesting that Gary has not actually had a major extended depressive episode since he got Khalid. And there's something about the way he now runs his life, and that he has Khalid, and he's committed to taking care of Khalid and not ever abandoning him. You know, I think he was kind of ready to abandon the human race, but not Khalid. And so his life is really in a very, very good place. And it makes me very happy, because I've certainly watched it move around. So that's basically it. That's the book. Thank you so much for being here. This has just been a treat.
Thank you,
It's
Ellen.
been an incredible.
You left us with this notion that everything hangs on Khalid, and yet Khalid was adopted at what age?
18, but it,
2020?
no, 2018.
2018, so that is a,
The
that
thing is,
gives me with great anxiety.
Well, in the book, if you read the book, I go into that because it's more chronological. And it talks about how long it was before he learned the word dyslexia, how long it was before he learned the word bipolar. He didn't know those words. And so he had all of these problems, and they started it here in Winterset, and they were a terrible problem for him in high school. So, I mean, that was that. And he leaves high school, and he goes to an art school in Wisconsin. It doesn't go well. So he decides to kill himself by going to Vietnam. So in 1970, he enlists, and he goes off to Vietnam. It's in the book too, it's a longer part of the story. And they did not kill him, so he came home from Vietnam. And there was a lot in his life that was about a kind of passive, like, if, you know, I just put myself in the right place at the right time, fate will take care of it, and I won't have to worry about it, which is not an unusual technique. And then he came back, and he went back to art school, and he went back to the art school in Wisconsin, then he went to the University of Northern Iowa, which is where he met Diane, his wife, and then they got married, and then it just becomes a very tumultuous period. 23 years of marriage. I don't think they were well suited in any way to each other, but you know, you stay out of somebody else's marriage. And when he got to New York, and that was in 1997, 98, and he had a friend there. He was teaching at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He was like, as he says, a kid in a candy store. It's New York City. He's an artist. And when you work for the Met, however minor your job, you'll have an ID tag. And that lets you in free everywhere. So you can go spend as much time as you want in whatever museum you want, seeing whatever exhibitions are on, which was incredible for him. And so he was teaching there. He was teaching at a girls' Catholic school, which was a very interesting kind of thing. And then the illness things were cycling. And so through this entire period, because that hypomania that was part of Kansas it fell off when he got to New York City, which meant that it created all kinds of problems in his relationships with people and problems. His health suffered. He went through all kinds of things. So it was hard. I mean, I could have done a very chronological one, but I thought I'd rather just sort of maybe give you a little bit of a taste. I know they have a copy of the book here, available on, Amazon. And it's really helpful, I think, to kind of look at it chronologically. When I was writing it, I really thought about that. Like, do people really want a biography, that kind of goes into all these things? And it went through a lot of iterations. And then I thought, no, you do kind of need that. You need that framework, because you have to start here and you have to get somewhere. So that's a biography. But then as you start moving down, more art comes in and more other things come in. Also because there just isn't that much to look at. There's just so little that survives from the early work, which hurts me. But it's gone, so.
In your opinion, would Gary be the artist he is if he did not have the mental challenges?
I think Gary would say, because I sort of asked him that, he would say, I am an artist, and I am dyslexic and bipolar, and it's all one big package. So taking away any part of that means that I would be a completely different person, and I really have no way of having any understanding of that. It's also one of the reasons he does not take medication. When he was hospitalized a couple of times, they loaded him up with tranquilizers and stuff, and he wouldn't take it. When he finally got diagnosed with bipolar, that psychiatrist in New York City wanted to put him on lithium, which is sort of gold standard thing, and he just said no, because he looked up lithium. He said, look what it does to your liver, look what it does to your kidneys, and I cannot have anything interfering with my art. I can't have anything changing this.
Well,
And
he seems
so-
really driven towards self-improvement. So not the type of person that would maybe lapse into self-medication with
No,
substances or substance abuse.
he
or
might
something like
lapse
that.
into suicide, but he would not lapse into self-medication.
He has a sense of determination.
Yeah.
And I, mentioned that he had a high school scholarship to the Des Moines Arts Center from Winterset. And then when he graduated from Winterset, he went to the Layton School of Art in Milwaukee. So his path was really determined very early on, and he was going to be in art one way or another. And I think that determination of being in art was established by my mother Lola.
Yeah.
And so he was on that path, and how the bipolar and the mental illness and the dyslexia came along and affected him, just like anything else, became an influence that you will find that any artist goes out
Yeah.
and discovers, and that's what they.
I'm always a little careful when people want to talk about mental illness and artists, and how, like, somehow mental illness drives art, it drives creativity, because it doesn't. It didn't with Van Gogh, and it didn't with anybody else, and it didn't with Gary. Gary was an artist. He knew that from an extremely young age, easily by high school, but really before that. Yeah. And with the dyslexia, he could barely get from grade to grade to grade. I mean, because he couldn't do the work and he couldn't read. And I was sort of familiar with what, that was back. Dyslexia technically the name, but there wasn't any real way to deal with it. There were no personalized education programs in the schools. None of the stuff we take for granted now. So he was just having this terrible experience. He wasn't athletic. He didn't have friends. Michael, I guess, is the athlete in the family.
Yeah.
And it just, and his father was difficult. And his father, Gary feels, has a variation of bipolar disorder.
Well, Gary was also a musician, and
Yeah.
he was an all-state musician from Winterset High School. So, I mean, he really was, when he was youthful, he had taken a path that was music and art, and
Yeah.
my older brother Mike, who you mentioned, was was the athletic, he was in wrestling.
But didn't he
football
go into
teams.
like nature stuff, like?
Yeah, he went to Iowa State University for forestry.
Forestry.
So, I mean, they talk about bipolar, those are two, yeah,
Well, they were just very different.
yeah. They
But,
did.
at one point I specifically said, which of your paintings is the most bipolar? It was actually the question I just went ahead and asked him. And he said, and it was interesting because he thought about it, he worked around it, and he said, well, the thing is they all are. And you can't really get into comparatives because bipolar is so much a part of what I am and everything and how I think and how my mind works and dream states and fugues and everything. It's just like, you know, we all have to do certain things. We have to breathe, we have to eat, we have to sleep. And he's bipolar, and that's just part of his package. And so, and I went back and looked at everything, and I thought, no, I can see that. And actually, it liberated me from trying to kind of find the disease in the art. And that was, I hadn't been really trying to do that, but it really put a firm stop to it.
Because you can really never understand qualitatively. You know.
No, because it's his life, it's his head, it's his experience. I wasn't there, I didn't witness it, and I am not a mind reader.
But you're also addressing it and calling it, you know, you're not pulling any punches, so to speak. You're calling it like it is, like he calls it.
He's a remarkable guy. And it's interesting because the art is I think very, very powerful. And I'm totally comfortable with the fact that there are a lot of people that go awfully political, you know, maybe I would prefer my art to be maybe a little less political, and that's fine with him too. It's completely not invested in that.
Well,
It's
he
like,
chose
this
a
is
great
the art.
piece for us here at the library,
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Anyway, and there are some cookies and bottles of water.
Yes,
I'm gonna
I'm
get
sorry
my
to-
water bottle.
I'm sorry to cut you short, Ellen.
So, thank
I'm a
you.
writer,
Thank you very much.
poet, so I didn't want to do it. Thank you for coming.